not being in it on the turn, there is no excuse for tanking red line. But you might not understand what this means, and hopefully with this coaching, I will try to make you understand why being in it on the turn will tank your red line. Okay? It's not exactly what you think it is. It's close to what you think it is, but it's not really exactly what you think it is. And this is not dependent on GTO, that you're going to go way overboard compared to like GTO frequencies. But the thing is that this is pool dependent. Okay? So, but the good news is, so like you might not know if it's your pool or another pool, or is this happening? It's kind of happening everywhere, especially if you're playing in a fast fold kind of format where I'm like a specialist, but also I'm doing okay on reg tables. Reg tables, obviously higher win rate, lower volume, right? Fast fold pools, lower win rate, higher volume, so you don't get to select. And there's a bigger pool there. The poker is a little bit more generalized in these pools, but these things happen in all pools. So that's a given, that unless you're not playing like the highest of highest stakes, which is I guess right now it's like 2K on GG or like 1K. It's happening in your pool too. Right. So let's move on. In this coaching, we're gonna try to find bluffs, like try to understand how to find bluffs in awkward spots where like literally every hand kind of seems plausible. How to stop over folding in scenarios where your opponent is banking on it, but this comes with a caveat. So, well, it is April Fool's. How to add proper bluffs to your turn raising range. Okay, so if you don't really, so if you're the kind of guy who is calling on the flop and then with the intention of raising on the turn, that's really, really good. With like your value, maybe sometimes like your sets and stuff like that, but you need to also add bluffs in that spot, and based on pool reaction mostly. And also how to completely cook your nit opponents with soft exploits. So this is really, really important, okay? So like the last point is the most important of the coaching. We're gonna talk a little bit about that in a sense of how humans react compared to theory, and why must that be, and how to basically like exploit them without going completely overboard and turning your strategy kind of face up, right? Because that's also, it's really important what you get to showdown with in these lines. Because sure, if you're playing like 1,000-player pool, like you're playing limit 5 Russian cash on GG or something like that, it won't be that important. But as you climb stakes, it's good to also have these practices, even if you're playing a very large pool size. If you go up and up, you will have frequent players that you battle against. And if you start showing just random weird stuff at showdown, people will kind of wake up. You'll kind of wake them up, like imagine like they're like kind of NPCs, right? You'll kind of wake them up. They'll have like, that meme with like neuron activation, and they will actually start like calling you down close to theory, which you really don't want. It's okay to show some draws. It's okay to show some kind of blocker bluffs, but it's not okay to show like super, super airball. Right, which kind of gives you a clue on the strategy that I'm gonna show today. But let's dive into it. So we're gonna look at how to find some bluffs on boards where it's actually not very easy to find bluffs. And we're gonna look at the first spot, which is low paired board. This is UTG single raise pot versus big blind. So the most nitty spot where UTG has like a very tight range and big blind has still a very wide range, because in sims and in practice, UTG opens 2x, right? So big blind has to come along with a lot of hands. So we're going to look into the spot, but also the best bluffs will be overcards in general. And we're going to talk a little bit about this spot. Generally, people default, and I mean people, right? They default to like a small bet size. I'm not going to bet range, because sometimes they just don't bet range, right? It's most of the time in the pools that you play, they just bet range on this board. I do too. It's not incorrect. It's actually not incorrect. You're gonna not get raised about 30% of the times or 25% of the times on this board. You're gonna get raised by some 8x. You're gonna get raised by some, I don't know, like 7-6, 6-5, 7-5, stuff like that. Flush draws, right? So we filter flush draws. You're gonna get raised by flush draws. Actually, more ace-x than this, because the reason why these high flush draws, you should always remember these to not raise. The reason why these high flush draws don't raise is just because they have showdown value, right? Their calling EV is pretty high compared to a raise EV. But anyways, you get bet into, you call, And then on the turn, sorry, you're the aggressor. We're talking about turn bluffs right now. So UTG wants to bet pot in this spot. And I think the size is okay-ish, but I think most opponents, and you can also do like a 75 in this one, especially if you bet range on the flop. Can't really size up that big. But what are the bluffs here? So you might think that bluffs are like clubs. That's okay. You still kind of want to take these to showdown, right? So these high EV check ones, right? And you really, really want to fire the lower ones, right? Queen high, jack high, whatever it is, right? Low ace highs. But that's not all, right? What are some of the bluffs that are on this board? So you got to think on like paired boards. It's a thing of kind of range versus range, right? Nobody really hits this board. That's why there's like a lot of raising going on the flop. But also remember that your opponent is not going to raise this frequently. Nobody raises paired boards as much as they should. But you still, so it's easy for an opponent to bet. And I think people overcommit with something like fives here and sixes, by the way. You just bet fives, you expect to get called by any 4x, whatever, 3x, stuff like that, draw and just check back on the river, which is fine, by the way. I don't mind it. But considering bluffs on this spot, I see also some people just bet draws, and that's okay. But it's not nearly close to enough. You got to remember, and also club blockers are important, but if you really look at something like queen jack or king jack or something like that, it's not really the deciding factor. Okay? Let's exclude clubs, actually, from flush draws. Queen ten of spades, queen ten of hearts, queen ten of diamonds. So on the turn bluffs, and nobody actually gets this, I kind of want you to understand that from the segment that turn bluffs are actually pretty hard to find, okay, on certain boards. Paired boards, rainbow boards, we're going to see. King 9. It doesn't feel right to throw king 9 into the void here, but you have to understand that, and you will see this on the next board especially too, you need to bet on the river hand, on the turn hands that can also value bet the river. Okay, so these overcards, and also they don't have showdown, right? Because ace king is obviously not really a great bet here, but jack 10 is. Just because if you get a jack on a 10, it's value bettable on the river. It really is. King 7, king 6, king 5, right? No showdown. So it's very, very hard to find these bluffs because they're actually a lot. These are not clubs. We excluded the clubs. It's like these are all the other ones, okay? So it's very, very hard to find bluffs where they're not very natural bluffs, right? You have clubs here, but can you really fire all the clubs? Like, does that even help too much? No, because you might get raised on the turn. Kind of sucks. I don't care if I have king jack of spades and just get raised on the turn. It's fine. Like king jack of hearts. Okay, no problem. And I still can river value bettable hands. So when there's an interaction like range versus range, that doesn't really hit the board that often, like 8-8-4, right? You don't really hit the board that often. Then these overcards are really important because they're the kind of hands can river value bettable hands. If you get raised, no harm, no foul. Okay, that's why you don't bet ace king, because ace king is so good that literally if you do get raised, it really sucks folding it. But king jack, queen 10, no problem, right? But these are pretty hard to find, so we're gonna see. Okay, so if we look at the overcards, they block the opponent's nut range also, right? It's because your opponent will have some pocket pairs higher than eights. They have decent equity against their continuing range also. So the turn is one of the more complex spots. It's the most complex spot by far. The river, not so much. The flop, not so much. Jack 10 makes for a great bluff in the spot. And also the lower the rank side, you guys kind of know this, the better the bluff, as it doesn't really have showdown value, right? So look in the check line for EV of like ace high versus king high versus queen high, jack high. And yes, you will fire some of those hands on the river too. So their EV kind of goes upwards a little bit. But also remember that EV of bluff is kind of zero-ish. It's still, you can still kind of look at turn EVs of check, right? Of check back and still understand that that's kind of how you rank bluffs. Yeah, so the tree kind of looks like a little bit of everything. But really, you want to bet like jack high, queen high, like hands that don't really have showdown. And also, the defender has to come along. Let's look at like pot size bet, okay? That's really important also. But even versus B75, the solver choose pot, but even versus B75, like you have to come along with ace 10 of clubs. Sorry, clubs is flush. Ace 10 of spades, ace jack of spades. This is not a flush show, okay? Ace 7. No, this is clubs. Let's exclude clubs to not be... There we go. Ace queen, ace jack, ace 10 versus UTG. is hard, right? It's really, really hard. Ace 4, not that hard. Ace 5, not that hard. Okay, fine. Ace 10, Ace Jack, Ace Queen, like all these high cards, I wouldn't call. I wouldn't call because people don't really bluff enough on the turn, right? So I wouldn't really call these. I wouldn't call, even though they're like kind of zero-ish EV, and it wants mostly spades, you'll see that Ace Queen and actually defends like at frequency, right? So I wouldn't call this. Also, Ace Queen off, right? Most of them. Ace King off. Opponents don't bluff enough. They don't find those spots. We're going to talk a little bit about this in this coaching, right? So that's why it's kind of hard to find. Even versus pot size bet, if we node log back, you still have to call ace high at frequency. And so those bluffs absolutely prick, by the way, because there's a lot of combos of ace queen, not a lot of combos of pairs, not a lot of combos of clubs. So you'll get some extra fold equity there. Let's look at an extremely dry board, like ace jack 3-8, rainbow, okay? So there's no flush draws on the turn. Ace jack 3-8. Same spot, UTG opens, right? We're UTG versus big blind. And we're looking at a turn, and let's see how easy, let's kind of rank how easy the bluffs are to find here. Ace jack 3-8. We have straight draws, right? Which are very easy to find. Also, by the way, the size is kind of 2x pot after you range about the flop, 2x pot turn. Your opponents will not find the size. They'll use like the 125-ish usually in pools that I've seen. So the bluffs are pretty okay. Like the 10-9, queen 9, queen 10, king 10, king queen. Straight draws, right? These are very easy to find, no brainers. Although queen 9 might not be fired. Then the second ones to find, the second hardest to find, are the 8x. Were we bluffing with 8x? Well, we block the turn 2 pair turn set, right? So if we bet range on the flop, which is not node lock, by the way, this is just the range, we're going to get erased by a lot of value on the flop. Pocket threes is pure, ace jack is very often, pocket jacks mixes. So on the turn, an 8 is amazing because it blocks his turn 2 pair jack 8, ace 8, blocks pocket 8s insanely much, right? So if you think about it, he's going to have 3 combos of sets on the turn, but if you have an 8, he just has 1 combo. So you're blocking 67% of his turn sets. So this is harder. These deuces, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s are harder. Nobody really does this. 6-5, 7-6, no flush draw. Nobody really does this. So this is very, very hard to find. And then the hardest is just king 7, king 6, king 5. Why is king 7, king 6, king 5? Mostly you block like one of the strongest calls, ace king. So this is one of their strongest calls. Also, yeah, pocket ace, 8x, they block ace 8, jack 8, pocket 8s, right? So an 8 you really want to have. Cool. And also with these hands, they just kind of unblock the folds. So I really, really like the 8x. I like the pocket pairs. Also, Uri patented something at some point where you would use these bluffs on flush draw boards, just a little bit of nugget here, because they actually have showdown value. Like pocket deuces, you would just fire here because it has showdown value. In this particular spot, it doesn't have like that much SDV, unless like even versus like queen 10, you still get called and you still get some showdown because you bluff these, check back the river, so you still has some sort of showdown. But again, on this board, it's extremely hard to find bluffs. It's really, really hard, except for like the very obvious ones that are like straight draws. You see that is like not really enough. Okay, you need 8x, you need the pocket pairs, you need like some of these pseudo connectors, and king 7, king 6, king 5, which is pretty wild. The next time you see somebody firing some of these bluffs, like king 7, king 6, king 5, in the pools, in the online pools, I would generally kind of attribute that guy not as being studied, but as being a bit wild on the turn. So I might call them down a little bit more, right? But aside from that, I would expect people on these boards to be pretty tanked, to have like when they 2x pot turn, but also you will see like smaller sizes. You will see something like B75 or whatever on this turn. Okay, so kind of same range, a little bit more like ace queen and ace 10, but people just losing a lot of value with that, right? So if you see like 2x pot, I expect people to be extremely tanked, extremely minimum ace king. But even this is kind of rare because people will have like 2 sizes on the turn. They will think that this is how it works. 2x pot, nuts. B75, okay, I can bluff here, you know? So I would use B75 and I would use hands like ace king and ace queen and ace 10 and then some bluffs, right? But in the 2x pot, people are really afraid to pull the trigger on this. So they will have like 2 sizes on the turn. The smaller one over bluffed, the larger one extremely under bluffed. So be wary of that. I will use 75, don't overthink. Don't even think about 2x pot bet. Yeah. So you'll widen your range a little bit, your value range. You'll still have bluffs in the 75. And then the overbet will be like extremely tanked. But in pools, there will be like really, really big size with like super nuts. And then the smaller size will actually be slightly semi overbluffed and weaker value, which is still gonna fold. So super face up, super kind of play your hand sort of meta in the online pools. Okay. So on these really dry boards, after range 25 flop, a lot of time you'll want to use on extremely large size on the turn, right? So the 2x pot is your opponent is raising 2 pair on the flop. Very important to understand that a lot of your opponents will raise their value on the flop, because if not, they just risk you B25ing, they call, check, and you check back turn, and you get to the river with a pot of 6 blinds and like 7, whatever. And then what are they gonna 5x pot? Like it's not a very valid strategy. You need to start putting in more money with your super strong hands very early. Okay, so you also need to have a bluffing range. Obviously, the most important rules when choosing bluff start. Oh, yeah, I missed this. Future value bet potential. This is insane. That's why you bet the draws, right? Obviously, like on flush draw boards, straight draws. But also in this spot, deuces to sevens. Why? Because you can river set and jam. Okay, so it's very important on the turn that a lot of your bluffs are actually value bettable in the future. So this is huge, and a lot of people miss this. Those deuces to sevens, that's why, except for threes, because it was a set. If you catch the river set, you also have like a very clear shove. Blocks calls, but very importantly, your opponent's top range, right? So this is why on the turn, you'll see like the turn pair 8 being used a lot in conjunction with call blockers like 10-8, 9-8, because you want to block like ace-10, ace-9, etc. But yeah, hands like 7-6, 6-5. It's low, which also have low EV in the check line. So that's super, super, super important. That's kind of how you find bluffs in awkward spots. Low EV in the check line, future value bet potential, which I think is one of the most important things. That's why I put it as number 1. And also blocks calls, but also your opponent's top range, right? So the turn pair is also a meta that you will find, for example, in the check line, and then your big blind need to super polarize, right? So single raise pot, think about this, single raise pot, button versus big blind, same board, ace, jack, 3-8, check line. Okay, let's say that in position you can use like an overbet on the flop, or like a big bet, or like just bet range, but there's no check. So if it goes check, he's obviously kind of having like a lot of ace-x. That's kind of how the pool plays. And on the turn 8, you will see that there's a lot of bluffs that have the 8x in them, because you want to block pocket 8s, you want to block ace-8. That's mostly and jack-8. And that's mostly the meta on that turn. Okay, so on this ace-jack 3-8, also against this geometric 224% turn, we can look at it a little bit. But you'll see that the only pure hands that you have to defend are 2-pair plus and ace-queen. The rest are all kind of mixing. And that doesn't really mean that you can kind of fold everything. I would versus pool. So let's look at it a little bit at the reaction. You can see that ace-jack 3-8, except for ace-queen, which is kind of mixing here, right? All these top pairs kind of mixing. Ace-3 is 2-pair. Everything has like a bit of a sliver here of fold. So they're not really printing. They're not, sorry, they're not really making a lot of money. Jack 4 is never going to get raised. It's extremely hard and extremely complicated. Even like Queen 10. Like versus 2x pot, Queen 10 is like open-ender. So it does have river catching potential, right? 8 nut outs, still folding, ace-10, ace-9. Horrible spot for these hands. And also ace-king, which is kind of... It shows it's 244 for the call. But with this size, with this like 2x pot, I'd expect my opponent to have like at least ace-king and 2-pair plus, and not a lot of bluffs. The only reason why ace-king here has 244 is because also there's a lot of bluffs in that spot, and it kind of beats some of the value like ace-queen. But most of the pools will not 2x pot with ace-queen. Like also Luke said, they were like B75. When you see an overbet of this magnitude, not bluff. It's like super, super rare that you can see. Or like, yes, there are bluffs like king 10, queen 10, queen 9, 10, 9, king, queen, but never like king 7, king 6, king 5. It's not really enough. And we're talking about UTG. We're going to get to button also soon. Okay, so it's extremely hard, even with the amount of appropriate bluffs, to find calls like king jack, ace 10, ace 9, ace 7, ace 6 versus like 2x pot. I would overfold, and we're going to talk a little bit about why. So that's kind of like the reaction range is very, very hard to defend on this turn. If your opponent doesn't really defend the right frequency, because all those hands have frequencies of call, and they're really horribly painful with like jack 4, queen, it's like king jack. all that ace-x. It's really painful to do on this board. And UTG has all the advantage. UTG is tanked, has jacks, has ace-jack, has everything, has aces, you know. All the bluffs are going to be printing really, really hard. And it's a great spot to bluff. And the question is it worth expanding your bluffing range? Yes. How? Well, you include all the mixes, basically. Because this is basically soft exploiting. Okay, you don't want to start really pounding on stuff like over betting with hands that don't really make any sense. But your opponent's gonna look into GTO Wizard and he's gonna be like, is this a thing? And he's gonna see a mix there and he's gonna understand, oh, this is a thing. Okay. He's not putting a note on you, although maybe like can bluff turns with overbets, like whatever, you know. But based on how the pool is playing, based on how everybody's playing, you're gonna get massively overfolded. And even compared to like theory, which is extremely, extremely hard to execute, and then you get to a river, and then the thing is, your opponents are gonna get to rivers versus other opponents versus the pool, who when they fire this big of a bet, they're gonna fire the river extremely often, because if you never have bluffs, you always have hands that can shove. Well, like most rivers, right? On that rainbow board. And they're just gonna see like nuts thrown in their face whenever they bluff catch with like ace deuce, just nuts, nuts, nuts. And you kind of form like a usefulness of just overfolding the turn, right? So whenever you have deuces, remember to fire this board because it's absolutely printing. You have king 7, fire this board, absolutely printing. 8x, the turn pair, fire the board, absolutely printing. You're blocking a lot of his call downs, right? So include the mixes until you play infinite hands versus some regs, right? So in this won't really happen in Zoom pools unless you're playing like, I don't know, like Stars 200, which is kind of small right now. They're ever going to default to defending more rather than less. That's almost impossible. Also, if I see somebody, I'm going to reiterate on this. If I see somebody doing this versus me, I'm going to take a note on him. So I'm going to mark, okay, this guy's crazy. And like start calling him down, not super wide, so he'll adjust, but I will call down like the mixing hands, right? So how to stop overfolding on the turn. April Fools. We are going to overfold on the turn, and this is not going to tank our red line. Although some people might think, oh, I'm giving away a lot of a red line by overfolding turns. They're going to run me over. Unless you have stats on somebody and he's firing like 70% on the turn, because they're kind of two types of players. There's players who fire a lot on the turn, but they're also like fire a lot on flop. A river is like complete give up. But overfolding reasonable amount is healthy, especially on boards where it's very hard. You need to be super creative to find these bluffs, right? Like the ones that I've just shown with like 8, 4, 3 or whatever. Have to find like Jack 10, Queen 10, a spade, stuff like that. Ace, Jack 3, 8. You need to know like to fire the under pairs, to fire the 8x, to fire the King 7, to fire the straight draws are easier, obviously, but it's still really hard to find to fire like all those gut shots plus all the pairs. Because people will think, okay, one more thing about the 8x on the turn. Think about it. Like ace, jack, 3, 8, you have king 8. It's, first of all, really unnatural. Second of all, you just bet really small on the flop. So that king 8 actually has a ton of showdown versus pocket 5s, pocket 6s, king 3 suited. Like all the pocket pairs, 3x, king, queen that your opponent might have. You check back, you take it to showdown, it still has a ton of EV, but it has a lot more EV in the betting line. So that's why the solver is betting it. But it's so unhuman to do so, to turn third pair into a bluff when there's not a lot of money invested. So if you have like a very specific read, but that somebody on your HUD, that somebody's overfiring the turn, make sure number one, he's on it pre-flop, because that also negates a lot of the bluffs. If he's not opening king 7 suited in early position, he's not going to have king 7 suited to bluff with, or deuces, or 3s, or 4s, right? So you need to have very specific reads on the player to start like calling down. And you might think that it's costing your red line, but it's not, because if he is not bluffing the turn enough, he will have a lot of value on the river, which he will fire again with. So you'll be folding and losing more. And this was one of my leaks, by the way. Before fixing them, you need to overfold the turn so then you can actually call a proper river. It's kind of like the same as big blind. You call a lot pre-flop, then he fires the flop. You give up on a large portion of your range. You're kind of adjusting towards the turn, right? Because you can't really call that stuff. It's really advantageous pre-flop to call from the big blind because you're putting in a low amount of money in like a larger pot. So you have like a lot of pot odds. But then on the flop, you kind of have to give up a lot because you're facing a very tough range. So MDF kind of flies out the window. So you must look, if you're kind of profiling a player who's overfiring on the turn with a HUD, this does not apply to GG, but it does apply if you're using a HUD on stars, for example. He has to have like decent stats pre-flop, so like 24-20, something like that, and on the flop too, right? Because if he's firing 40% on the flop and 70% on turn, that's not a lot. Okay, he's just overfiring value on the flop, and then he has a lot of value on the turn. If it's 70 and 70, that's overfiring. Okay, that's okay. And you'll see that he has like 30% or 35 on the river, whatever. Right? So make sure that you correlate the stats and don't just call down nits that have 70% on the turn. Right? Very easy for him to overfire. People will resort usually to putting too much value in turn spots, too few bluffs, especially on boards that are really hard to find. Right? So now that you've seen like 2 or 3 boards that are kind of hard to find bluffs in, you kind of understand. Because people will fire draws. It's very easy to fire draws, but if there's no draws, they have to know a little bit. Sure, they're just going to fire whatever draws are available. The rest of the hands just mostly take to showdown, right? So zero, like discount the air balls because they're very hard to know. And there's 2 types of people. There's people who never do it, and there's people who absolutely overdo it. And they're very easy to, take a note if you see somebody like bluffing like the Jack 10, Queen 10, whatever, the air balls. And you can kind of call them down wider, but again, very importantly, not to call them down so wide as to give them a clue on what you know about them. Okay? Mixes are good. So that's why it will not cost you red line to overfold on the turn, because if they have like a ton of value, it's like you can even apply a strategy, by the way, super life hack. Overcall the flop versus small bet. Nobody's doing this, really. A lot of people aren't really doing this. Overcalling the flop against a small bet versus an opponent who's range betting on a lot of boards. And by this, I mean, for example, let's say that the board is like, whatever, ace jack 3, you can kind of call something like 10-6, no, let's say 10-7 suited backdoor, okay? Which you wouldn't versus like that bet size. Maybe you'd raise, but you can kind of overcall because they split badly. What they do is they lower the size and bet a lot more value on the turn than they should. They underbluff the turn. They just check back, especially on turns that it's really hard to, to find these bluffs. And then they will have a lot of trash on the river. So you call the flop with 10-7. It comes 8, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Check. And then on the river, they just end up, whatever, king river, deuce river, 3 river. It doesn't really matter. They end up having a lot of trash on the river. So they will overly give up versus a small size. Okay? You can use overbet if you want. You can choose that size too. If it makes some sense, right? The board has to make some sense. But a small size will do the trick, and it's going to be really, really good. So you can kind of overcall the flop because they split really badly. If they bet the turn, it's always super value or value heavy. And there's a lot of trash that goes in the turn check back line. You fire the river and you pick up a few extra 0.1, 0.5 BB per 100 that way, let's say, right? In the long run, to your whole win rate. Right, so calling a lot of marginal pairs but small chance to improve on the turn results in overfolding rivers, by the way, because they will fire river way more often in their betting line. Now, your red line will be tanking because you put in that money on the turn and then you fold the river. So you fold larger pots more frequently, right? Just fold the turn with these hands that don't actually have like a good chance of improving, like pair plus backdoor, stuff like that. Sorry, now pair plus flush draw. Right, so maybe you had a better view over the regs in the pool, but everybody's nitty. Do not full stop, disrespect them, full stop. Overbluff them and overfold versus them on the turn because they give up so much, especially in like broken lines. You can do broken lines like bet flop, check back turn, over bet river, do stuff like that. Or you can check back the flop, see if they fire. If not, they will overfold the turn. If not, you check back, see if they fire the river, they split badly. They check river, fire the river, they will overfold on the river too. So this is how you stop overfolding on the turn. You do overfold on the turn versus most of your opponents versus most pools. So that was my April Fools. I hope nobody got bothered by it, but yeah, that was a trick question. So now I want you guys to have like a little bit of a exercise of how you perceive getting check raised on the turn when you bet the flop and turn. Check raising versus a reasonable size on the turn after calling a flop bet is one of the most nutted lines from regs since the dawn of online poker. It was even called the Beluga theorem, if you haven't been here like 15 years ago. But Beluga was a guy named Beluga Whale. He would make instructional videos, and he had something that was called the Beluga theorem. which said that if they call the flop from the big blind and then they raise the turn versus your turn c-bet, they're nutted. And this is true today too, in general. I will massively overfold top pair versus this line, especially if it's like a decent size. If it looks like he's gonna shove river, I will. Yeah, that's still correct in this day. It's been 15 years, nothing has changed. Why? Because the big blind doesn't really want. And in the solver, it's not like this. You might not believe me. In the solver, it doesn't look like this. On the board, at least, that I will show. So you don't want, as the big blind, to play a pot of B25 range on the flop and then check back turn. Because the pot, again, is 6 blinds. He fires the turn, you call, right? The pot is like 15 on the river. You don't want to give him the opportunity to check back. And people will underbluff and underfire as size, right? So like Luke, you said that you fire 75, not 2x pot. You don't put in enough money. Number one, you don't fire as big as you should. Number two, you don't have enough bluffs. Number three, you don't have enough bluffs on the river. So the frequency goes down, the size goes down, the frequency goes down. So you actually have to raise all your value, like the super value on the turn. Otherwise, you will lose a lot of money because you get with it to showdown too often. And I really, really recommend this, by the way. I do this in real game. I will never slow play in this spot. Like never, ever slow play. It's also one of the most because if your opponents don't exploit you by over bluffing the river, like do anything, they never do. There's no point in slow play. In theory, there is, because the solver can go wombo combo and just start bluffing everything on the river. People will not. If you see somebody who does this, it takes eons for them to adjust and do stuff. So it's one of the most under bluff lines. People don't like to put in a lot of money, especially out of position, without having the best of the best. And if it's like a really drawy board, they will do this with combo draws, which is correct. It's good. Makes a lot of sense. I might stop slow playing. Never slow play versus people. So the most successful regs, by the way, are the ones that put in a lot of volume with a lot of volume of betting with a lot of hands, by the way. That's like the most definitive kind of trait. But most regs don't. And you end up getting to the river on like a 12 blind pot, 15 blind pot, even 20 blind pot. It's still catastrophic if you have a set. Don't slow play. If you have pocket eights on the turn, ace, jack, 3-8, and he's betting, raise and shove river. Always, always. Don't miss the opportunity to stack. The worst thing is missing the opportunity to stack ace, jack with pocket eights or pocket threes on that board. It's the thing that kills your win rate the most. Don't bother when he has like aces and jacks, because he has 6 combos of that, and then there's like 9 combos of ace jack, and then if you have eights, there's also three combos of threes. You're ahead of his whole calling range. It's okay. So stop wasting win rate. What should be a good turn check raise size 2-we? We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about it in a second. Good question. Very, very good question. I don't think you should go completely geometric. I think you should go, if you're check raising with value, you should really go with the size that will let you kind of pot shove river. It's kind of in there. Depends on his bet size, but it's kind of I think geometric is like 106 or something on the turn. I wouldn't do that. I would do something like 75 and then jam river. It depends a little bit on opponent and board, but that's kind of how it like B25, B75. I would raise to something like 20 bigs. On the turn, he calls, river's like 45. I have like 75 behind, jam. It also caps ranges because I want his top pairs to come along. And that's kind of like the size that I use with my bluffs too. I want to, and if you're thinking, oh, opponents will know that you're sizing differently based on, I play reg tables, I play with the same guys, they never do. If I see somebody, and also if I see somebody calling with like some random hand, I will know. So, because people don't really know like how to adjust with like soft exploits. Those guys are like 2K, play higher. Don't worry about people catching on to like whatever you're doing, because they're not. So try to treat poker, if you're playing 25, 50, 100, treat it as your playground. Treat it as your experimentation. Okay, we'll get to how to expand a little bit of check raises on the turn, because you'll see how much solver does it. You will disagree, and then we'll see how to expand it. Okay, so it kind of, by like calling, also caps ranges further severely, because if you're out of position facing a bet on the turn, if you call, it's kind of the last point also that you can guarantee money entering the pot. If you just call, you check river, and sure, you can lead river, but that's what the hell. You can just check back the river. It's the last point where you can guarantee money entering the pot. Leading rivers, very rare. All the hands that you want to put your stack in with must raise the turn. especially versus pool regs that are overly passive and don't value bet enough on the river. They don't, and they don't bluff enough by far on the river. So how do you perceive check raising on the turn? Nutted. How do your opponents perceive check raising on the turn? Nutted. Everybody does this. So maybe, again, reiteration, maybe you had a better view over the regs and the pools. Don't. Full stop. Disrespect them. Full stop. Overbluff them and overfold versus them on the turn. Getting check raised, especially on a rainbow board, is perceived as being tank solid. And I would really hope that you guys will perceive it as tank solid. And these are also the boards to bluff raise on the most, actually. And it's a good reason because it's kind of like you see raise, call, set, raise, call, two pair, raise, call. And you keep seeing nuts on these boards because it's really hard to find bluffs, right? And or it's hard to pull the trigger with 8x on the turn. It really is, right? So it's not. You keep seeing nuts get thrown into your face. You're gonna fold. He's gonna think, what are his bluffs? You know, no, fold. So let's jump into Wizard and look at a few spots where you can expand your check raise turn range like crazy. Okay, and also obviously the wider the range is, okay, the kind of, you know, like the harder they are to play. Okay. Right, so ace jack 3-8. We're gonna look at like also the button. So this is UTG. We're gonna look also versus button. But B25 range call, B75, and I will raise a size that I want to make sure that he knows I mean business, right? So I'll raise to at least 20 bigs for sure, for sure. It doesn't matter like his size. I want the pot to be. I want him to know that the pot is at least 40 something bigs on the river, so he knows that I can shove. Solver, we're raised here 2.5%. I completely disagree. In a lot of these spots, solver would not really raise. I'm never in my life calling eights here. I'm never in my life ever calling jacks here. No way. No way. Right? Let's look at the reaction range, by the way. What our opponent has to call, so versus this raise size. First of all, you have to understand that his value range starts somewhere at ace 8, and there's quite a few natural bluffs here, like the straight draws. He's not going to fire like deuces very often, right? Or like king 7, king 6, king 5. This is the previous example, so you remember the bluffs, like 8x. In this spot, he's actually checking king 7. But it's like versus this size, I would just fold every jack, by far, by the way. Like if you're thinking about like adjusting, I'd call every ace, fold every jack. Except for like really strong ones, whatever. I would absolutely raise my sets nonstop every day of the week. He's just gonna bet this size on the turn with ace 9. Sorry, I said that value starts at ace 8. I missed that ace 8. I'm a little bit sick. It's ace 9, okay, or like ace 7, somewhere around that. That's the value threshold cutoff. I will always raise nuts here. I will always raise ace jack in this spot. I won't miss that. Always. I will also have threes sometimes here and raise them. But it's super important if you're raising to have like a decent size so you get like fold equity from top pair. It's a size that just means business. And if you see like what he has to react with, queen 10 is like a bit of a natural one, but king queen is gross. King jack is gross. Like imagine you're UTG, you're firing into big blind, you're firing turn, and he raises almost pot. You can even pot it. It doesn't really matter. Ace 9 is not looking very sexy in this spot. Even ace king. Dude, I would fold ace king here. Legit. Because I know that the pool is just extremely nitty in this line. You're not going to see a lot of king queen. You're not going to see a lot of stuff like jack X being raised here because it's set blocker. So I would fold a lot. And pool folds a lot. Saying this 20 BB is so strong for big blind. Yes, it's so strong. It's ridiculous. It sets. It's at least ace jack. Ace 8 is afraid to raise here. It sets. So how do you expand your raising range? Well, look at the hands that you hate to call, but have really good odds to jam river with. So outs that you can jam river with. With queen 10 is gold here. I would full raise queen 10 in the spot. Suited, offsuit, doesn't matter. Remember that you're also raising jacks and eights pure. Queen 10, always raising. It doesn't matter if you're leaving your call super capped. It's already capped, number one. Number two, your opponent is not going to punish you. He's not going to overbluff everything. Okay, if he is, he's also very obvious to see. You call him down with like ace queen ones, because you will. And then, or like two pair, you have like jack 8, whatever, call down. And then you see something like king 5 suited, whatever. So I'd attribute king 5 suited to him just firing everything, or like 7-6 or whatever. Okay, this guy, taking out He's like that kind of player. So I would expand my raising range here with queen 10. I'd expand my raising range here with some 8x. It's like you kind of like queen 9 suited is great if you can have it in the spot. But queen 10 is gold. Like, and also, by the way, I would expand my raising range also with king queen, because people don't really, they don't bluff catch like this. Oh, ace 9 because it blocks and blocks, whatever. Gonna call ace 4, ace 5. No, they're gonna call ace king, ace queen, because human like these hands look extremely strong. They look strong. Okay, I want to bluff catch. People are not so advanced that they start calling ace 5. This is not Linus, okay? We're talking about normal Zoom pools. They call ace king, ace queen. You have the queen 10, which is great. You have the king queen, which is still valuable on the river. I would raise these hands. Sorry. Also 10-9 suited if we have it. So if you do get to have this, but you don't if you do get to call it. It's really good. But yeah, queen 10 and king queen, super, super important. Okay? I would even look at king jack because it blocks ace jack jacks and blocks like ace king. Rather not call it. Okay? Reiterating to what we were talking about earlier, don't call stuff that you just outright fold on every river except for when you hit like a very small amount of outs. I'd rather just raise it. So this is how I would expand my raising range on this turn. It's extremely hard to defend for UTG. To raise this, he has to call a ton of top pairs, king, queen, some sliver, queen, jack, but it's like whatever. King, jack is gross. Absolutely gross. Has to re-raise king 8. It's BS, man. Like some of this defense is like absolutely BS. And if you think about it, what's his calling range? Like jacks, 8s, aces, maybe ace, king, ace, jack, ace, 8. That's about it. But there's a lot of extra stuff in here that if it doesn't call, your bluff prints. Like purely prints. And it will. That's why we're doing it. We're not super overdoing it. We're not going like extremely crazy. Like you're going like Solver likes Jack 4 suited, but I'm not going to do that because my opponent will label me as Looney Tunes and just start calling with every ace. You don't want that. You want to keep a little bit of image of balance, right? That was super, super important. Let's look at another spot. Yeah, a button versus big blind, it's way worse, by the way. So button versus big blind, he opens 2.5x pre, so he gets on the turn when he B75s at 6.2, so you can raise 75 to like 21.7. It's very important to make sure that your raise size means business on the turn. I will almost never raise half pot on the turn. There's theoretical considerations. Humans don't play like that. Okay, and in this spot, solver raises 1%. No. 8's pure. Ace jack pure. Oh, this so ace jack is he's kind of raising it on the flop for this B25. It's kind of like range, But he's raising like pot, super polar. I can understand that. I will have ace jack sometimes on the turn. I will raise it. Ace 8, raise, right? Look at versus this R75, what button has defend. Almost every top pair. I'm not defending every top pair versus this raise. Like almost ever. It's not good. You're just going to run into nuts way too much, right? People will raise nuts on this turn. Will think, oh, pocket 3 is okay. I slow play, call flop, maybe over bets turn, maybe bets turn, but I will raise the turn. No problem. And this is not bad. By the way, it's not a bad strategy versus pools. But defending versus B75 versus raise 75, defending A7 will put you in like dire straits. All these mixes here will put you in dire straits. Even ace queen, which is kind of 0.32, like mixing a little bit here, right? Because of this queen of clubs, will still put you in dire straits. Because when they bet river, you can never call. Like they shove river, they're ahead, they're under bluffing, you can never call. And they're not bluffing enough on the turn. So we get to something really, really important is pool will play versus pool how they think that pool is playing. Like versus how they think that pool is playing. Pool is heavily under bluffing this turn. Pool will let go of a lot of these top pairs. And a lot of this stuff like king queen is even very hard to defend. King jack is gross. Every jack X is kind of like mixing 0.02. It's very rough. It's really, really rough. Like jack 8 is 2 pair, 10-9 is like, okay, these are fine, right? But every top pair on like ace high boards is gross. So on this turn, I will expand my raising range. With mostly the hands that I've already said. It's like, in a sense, solver doesn't put king queen into raising range because it can kind of call its ahead of some bluffs, but it will not put king queen in the raising range because if you raise king queen, solver starts calling ace 5, ace 4. If you raise 5-4, solver starts calling ace queen, ace king. Does that make sense? So it's like a cat and mouse game. And the solver doesn't really do justice to what bluffs are really good sometimes versus the pool. pool would just defend the strongest hands, you know, ace king, ace queen, stuff like that. You won't see bluff catches with like ace 4. They do make sense, or like ace 7 in the spot. They do make sense, but humans don't do that. They call stronger hands. Although it doesn't make any sense, you still perceive it as being a stronger hand. It's ace king. You still have that. So I'll expand my check raising range on this board too by a lot. And I wanted to show you guys another check raising range, another check raise board, which is super nice, super nice. So big blind versus button, and there's a lot of guys. If you haven't watched my flop coaching, by the way, go to that one. A lot of guys will think, oh, this is an ace high board. It's okay for me in position. Okay, I will fire it. I haven't even put in like range here, by the way. I just put in just B33. We should always punish their equity dividend turn balance by fast playing our best hands. 100, 1 million. If it's something, Mihailo, yeah. If it's something that I want you to take from today's coaching, 100% you should always put in money with your good hands at every point. And remember that you should never slow play your sets past the turn. Out of position versus today's pools. Never slow play your sets past the turn. Don't let them check back the river. Don't let them bet ace 9 check back to the river, because there's also like you're also kind of backing up your bluffs. Sometimes you will have bluffs in that spot and they will call down with like their stronger hands, see a bluff. They will still call you down. Okay. But it's super important. Super important. Do not slow play your sets past the turn. No. Raise flop, raise turn. I would actually, because they invest with like a larger portion of the range, I would actually let them. I really like. It's like, although it's the most obvious thing ever, I really like doing this with sets, and like especially bottom set, like calling flop, raising turn, not raising flop immediately. People overfold versus flop raise, overfold versus turn raise, doesn't matter. At least they put in more money on the turn sometimes versus your check raise on the flop, right? So, but is like B33, and then you call, and then on the turn he's like B75, and he doesn't know, because he hasn't watched my coaching, that this board is absolutely surreal, super important for you. I didn't let big blind lead, because most people don't do that. I let button just bet 1/3. He doesn't really want to very often. Big blind raises a lot in this spot, right? But whatever. And then B75 on the turn. Well, like an 8 turn, innocent turn. But thing is, this is still your board. So let's go to a raise of 75, which is about 24 bigs. And you will see a very low frequency. Again, please raise 5s. Please raise 3s in the spot. It likes to always raise 4 deuce suited, that's for sure. You do need to raise on this turn. And imagine the absolute hellstorm where your opponent is folding ace king. Like solver folds ace king here outright, but it's calling queen deuce. Like this is, the brain is fried. Like, you're not going to get called from queen deuce, king deuce, 5-4. Okay, 5-3 is 2-pair. 6-4 is open-ender, but 5-4 is horrible. No one play like this in pool? Yeah. People just bet their top pairs. And on this turn, when you get raised, it's really horrible. Like, it's so hard to play a hand like ace jack. And the thing is, most people won't actually bet like this low amount. They will kind of go like ace 7 plus and just bet everything on the turn. And then you're putting them completely in the blender. And the thing is that you have so much equity here. You have 7-4, 6-4, 6-5. I was pure raise 6-5 on this turn. Like all the pair plus gut shot, a lot of gut shot here. I wouldn't call king 4. I'd raise it because I'm blocking their top, like their top calling. I would find some more stuff here, like 5-6, 3 deuce. All this stuff I would not call. Like 3 deuce I would not call. 4-3 I would not call. Raise. It's such a blender spot, it's ridiculous. And I would fold 4. Sorry, not 4s. I would fold 6s and 7s too. Fold 9s, pure. Because they're not bluffing enough on the turn. And you're going to hit 2 outs on the river. You're dead. So I would over raise from this bottom side and always raise value. Always raise value. Call 4s, call deuces. Enough outs. It's okay. Lead river when you hit. Obligatory. But the rest, I would like over raise on the turn. This turn, I would really expand my raising range on these boards. Okay, especially these boards that, as big blind, it's advantageous. And yeah, it's also really hard to coming back to a board where people should really be over betting. Why 8 is raised here? The 8 was raised because it blocks the turn 2 pair and turn sets. Oh, pocket. Oh, 8s. That was a set. Wait, the turn was an 8. No, never mind. I thought you were asking. Let me rehash this one. I thought you were asking 8x. Oh, 8s is a set. Yeah. 8s, 5s, 3s. Always. 8x could be a raise. No problem. So I approve it. My name is Ray William Johnson. I approve this message. If you have opponents that B25 on these boards and B75 on the turn, which you're going to say, yeah, but he has all the overpairs. No problem. Why? 9-8-4-3, you get check raised. Look at the amount. So the solver doesn't really raise that much. Has bluffs, okay, 6-5, 10-7, okay, has bluffs. Very important to know, to understand. But also calls queen jack and jack 10, which I completely disagree with. And then look at how much imposition has to defend. Look at 8x. Jack 8, queen 8, ace 8, king 8, ace 8, king 8, jack 8, okay? 9x, not that problematic, but still being thrashed. 9-7, 9-6, 7-6 open ender, 6-5 open ender, no problem. Ace 4, horrible. Ace deuce, ace 5, pretty hard to defend, but okay. 9x, not that bad. Queen jack, pretty horrible. Yeah, the overpairs, you're going to say, yeah, but he has the overpairs. Yes, no problem. But he has to defend a lot, okay? So I would expand my check raising range here on this turn. But I would put in hands that I can value bet the river with, and they're absolutely horrible to call. So like, okay, 9x, 8x, we can call. 8x even, it's like kind of, but jack 10, like, I don't want to call here. 6-7, I don't want to call. 6-5, I don't want to call. I want to raise all these hands. Queen jack, especially. Yeah, you're ahead of jack 10, but he's not going to stop with jack 10 on the river. He's going to fire. The only way you're winning by calling queen jack is when a jack hits, he has jack 10, he checks back. Or like queen 10. That's it. It's a very low amount. People are overfolding turn check raises. Would you mostly give up with bluffs on the river? It depends if I have like a size read on them. There's a lot of players who overbet the turn with super nuts and B75 with something like on this board with something like ace 9 or king 9 or ace 8, and they were overbet pocket 10s plus and stuff that's better generally. First, those people, I would just absolutely just kill it on the river, just overbluff jam. A really good question, by the way. Would you mostly, any idea what the data says for that? If you check raise the turn, it's very important. Also, I've reiterated in this coaching that you need to have a lot of hands that you can jam the river for value or value bet the river with, jam the river for value with. And that's mostly why versus pool. So no, I would not overbluff the river. No, you can give up. But to understand that the turn, I would still have some bluffs on the river. Absolutely mandatory, like 6-5 in the spot, stuff like that. Or like, no, actually jack 10. I want to block the overpairs. You still want to have some bluffs, but I would not be overbluffing the river. No. I mostly give up with bluffs, yeah. Just fire the absolutely mandatory brain dead ones. So once they call on the turn, they usually have like a really strong hand. Very strong hand. I would not expect to see a lot of top pair showdown. Right, so if they do that, then yeah, mostly. It's not exciting, but it's profitable on turn, not profitable on the river. That's it. Okay, cool. So there's one more thing that I wanted to tell you guys was that it's really a game of perception. How does he perceive you? It's the most important thing. Most people underbluff turns and expect others to underbluff turns. They will overfold versus raises, and it's called the mirror complex. I've also said this in other coachings. It's people play like they would think that you'd play how they play, and that's the thing. Like most maniacs, not only like infinite bluff, but also call people down a lot. You know, because that's why. Because they think that you play how they play, they bluff a lot. So the antidote to that is calling down. Most people think that their opponent will have a style of play similar to their own, so they will kind of adjust accordingly. Most people are nits in these pools. They will think that other people are nits, and most people are nits, so they're right, but you're not. You're not going to be, right? So if you're always one step ahead, if you start thinking differently about how your opponents will kind of react based on how they think you play, okay? To me, this has been like infinite money machine, like super breadwinner. So perception is king. This is the most important thing, right? So how he sees your range, how he sees not necessarily your range, because actually most people will not put you. They're going to put you on like a hand or a few hands that they think you have, and it's hard, like in limited time in game, to realize that that's the case and realize like a whole range or like whatever. It's very hard, to be honest, in game. So they're just going to put you on like a few hands, and they're going to put you on like the hands that the pool shows up with the most often. You're incognito. Don't worry about it. Bluff away. We went through some examples. Anyways, if you guys have like any questions, you can tag me in Discord, #weekly coaching. No problem. As I said, I check Discord very often. I have students there, so they also ask me some questions. So I check it like almost daily. So there will be no question left unanswered in like at least like 24 hours, something like that, if there's something, right? So just to reiterate, like if you understand your opponent's perception, how he thinks of you, you can use that to your advantage very, very often, including these turn bluff raises on boards where it's really hard to find bluff because they don't know them either. So if they don't know them either, they can't put them in the, oh, he has that flush draw. There's no flush draw, right? So if he can't figure out which bluffs are good on that turn, he won't figure out the bluffs that you have, or like what bluffs you can have. Does that make sense? Hope it makes sense. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for attending. Cheers. And if you have any questions, I'll be in Discord. Bye-bye.